to our online course. This is lecture 11, Good Clinical Practice. In this lecture, we will learn what is GCP, that is Good Clinical Practice, why we should follow GCP, what are the various prerequisites for conducting a study which has a compliance to GCP, what are the various responsibilities of stakeholders, the record keeping and data handling, the quality assurance, the statistics, and also address special concerns. We will also briefly cover principles of GCP in this lecture. When we talk about GCP, good clinical practice, we may think that it is about the clinical practice. It is actually an international ethical and quality standard, which has two focus areas. One is the ethics, where we talk about the right, safety, and well-being of all the study participants. The other aspect is about the data and the results, which should be credible and accurate. So, if you see the GCP definition as per the Good Clinical Practices for Clinical Researchers in India, CDSA launched in 2001, you will have the definitions described there, and this course, that this lecture 11 covers the GCP by CDSA 2001. So, GCP in this CDSA 2001 guideline defines as a standard, which is an international standard for quality as well as ethics for clinical studies or trials that encompasses various areas. What are those various areas? Design, conduct, monitoring of study, termination of the study, audit of the study, analysis, reporting, and documentation of the studies. Whenever you conduct a study which is in compliance with GCP, you give public an assurance. This is the most critical and important part of GCP, that any study which is in compliance with GCP, good clinical practice, assures two important factors. One, that the right, safety and well-being of subjects are well protected. I prefer to say participants, not subjects, because I believe participants is a better term and subjects is like king and his subjects. That is why you will see that the ICMR ethical guideline released in 2017 refers them as participants, but the subjects are referred in the regulatory documents, hence it has been used as subjects. So, what does a compliance to GCP ensure? It ensures, it gives public an assurance that the right, safety and well-being of all the study participants are well protected, and the data which are generated during a clinical trial or research are credible and accurate. GCP also ensures that the studies which are conducted using the IP, that is the investigational product, or IMP, that is the investigational medicinal product, are scientifically authentic. They are produced in a GMP facility and all the details are properly documented. So, if you see the slide, you will understand that GCP can be very easily remembered through this graph or the graphical representation, which talks about how the study is designed. We say the design of the study is extremely important, because if there is a flaw in the design, you may not be able to reach your possible outcome. So, designing the study is critically important. It is covered under the protocol. When the study is designed, the protocol is reviewed and approved by the ethics committee as well as the regulators. Then the study begins. The conduct of the study is extremely important, and then when you conduct a study, recording those data which are released or which are captured during the study is very, very important. During the entire conduct of the study, monitoring those for quality control is extremely important. When the data are gathered, analysis of all the data are very important. Once the data are analyzed, reporting them, which is a true representation of the data which has been captured through source document, is extremely important, and that covers the entire cycle of GCP. GCP, to easily remember to me, is about RSW, that is right, safety and well-being of all the study participants to be well protected, and DQI, that is a data quality and integrity. So, GCP should be followed to ensure that the clinical trial as well as it can be clinical research, is consistently performed to the highest ethical and scientific standards. This is very, very important. When we talk about GCP, we come across various terms, and understanding those terms and the definitions is extremely important. This presentation is extremely short, so I am not going to go deeper into the definitions, but there is a document attached with this lecture note, and this document will help you understand all the definitions which are explained in a chronological order. Please go through them carefully. This will help you to understand this lecture better. Once you have understood the definitions, it is important for us to now move on and speak about the prerequisites. What are the prerequisites for conducting a clinical trial which is in compliance with GCP? Let us understand about the first thing which is required for a clinical trial. It is the IP, that is the investigational pharmaceutical product or investigational medicinal product or investigational product. This IP, which we refer as, must be documented properly. That means the document should have the physical properties, the chemical properties, the pharmaceutical details, the formulation. But apart from that, the most important thing is about the storage and handling. How you are going to receive those, how you are going to keep it, how you are going to maintain the temperature, humidity, these are extremely important. Second part is the preclinical supporting data. We have a separate lecture on preclinical requirements, which is lecture L4. You have already undergone the L4 because this is the L11 lecture, and all the preclinical requirements are dealt in detail there. You might have understood that knowledge about the clinical, about the animal pharmacology, the animal toxicology data, the safety pharmacology data are extremely important here, where you would like to understand that what is the nature of the IP. So, this should be adequate and quite convincing to support the proposed clinical study. Then we move to the next part, which is about the protocol. The protocol is dealt very in detail, and if you read the new drugs and clinical trial rules, you will find all the details which are mentioned there. So, the protocol should have all the elements required. We have a lecture which addresses this very critically. So, I will not divulge more or discuss here in this lecture. The next part is about the ethics committee and its approval. We have a separate lecture which is about the ethics committee. It is called ethical consideration. This is the lecture L10, which you have just now completed this lecture, and this describes about all the requirements which are necessary for conduct of any clinical trial. We also have a separate lecture called L9, which has already completed by you. That is about how to register your EC, that is ethics committee, as well as re-registration. EC registration and re-registrations are mandatory for ethics committees which review studies which are for clinical trials. We also have a separate lecture coming up which is on Sugam portal, how to use the Sugam portal, and also another lecture about CTRI registration, Clinical Trial Registry of India. So, we will move now to the critical part of the GCP, where we discuss about the responsibilities. There are various stakeholders in a study, in a clinical trial, like sponsor, investigator, institution, ethics committees, monitor. We will try to deal with them one by one in very brief. First, let us begin with the sponsor. Sponsor, as you know the name, is an organization, or it can be a person who initiates the study, who writes the protocol. There can be an investigator who has written the protocol and is also initiating the study. That person can be sponsor investigator. Whereas, a person who has initiated a study may have taken a funding from another organization, and that can be a funding agency. So, there is distinction, you have to distinguish between sponsor and funding agency. Sponsor is most important because sponsor owns the study. So, the sponsor is responsible for choosing the investigator and the institution. It is extremely important that the sponsor or the organization, chooses a right investigator and a good institution. The sponsor has all the information about the IP, its supply, how we will get it, how it is manufactured, how it is stored, how it is handled, how it is returned back, how it is destroyed. Sponsor is the owner of the protocol and ensures the compliance of protocol as per the good clinical practice as well as the current regulatory requirements of clinical trial in India. Sponsor is legally responsible for implementation of entire quality assurance system for the clinical trial. Monitoring and auditing is also a sponsor's responsibility. Monitoring is quality control, whereas auditing is quality assurance. We will deal with this in our subsequent slide. Submission of the status report, which is the update about the clinical trial happening, is also a responsibility of sponsor. Reporting all the adverse events which occur during the clinical trial conduct as well as serious adverse event is also the responsibility of sponsor. We have a special lecture which addresses these areas. Also the financial compensation in case of any injury and death. This is also dealt in a specific lecture in this course. The responsibility of sponsor can be said simply by one who selects protocol, investigator and institution, who pursues the regulatory authority, that is the Central Licensing Authority, here it is CDSA, Central Drugs Standard Control Organization, pursues ethics committee, that is IEC or EC, and the investigator. Sponsor is one who organizes the logistics, the trial logistics, gathers the funding, one who negotiates different contracts like tripartite agreements, budgets. Sponsor supports the investigator and the monitor so that the conduct of the study is done in a very streamlined and in a good fashion. Sponsor is responsible for operationalizing the quality systems of the entire clinical trial. Sponsor is also responsible for reporting all the safety issues that occur during the study conduct and also to report to the regulatory authority, which is the Central Licensing Authority. Here it is the CDSA. Sponsor selects the monitor. Monitor is one who conducts monitoring visits from study start till study end, authorized by sponsor. Monitoring team is a team which works along with the clinical trial team to find out if there has been any deviations or any non-compliances which has occurred during the trial conduct. So, in brief, if you want to know about the monitor is a person or a unit who will verify wherever necessary and ensure. Ensure what? For example, will ensure whether the investigator who is involved in the study is qualified, medically qualified, has the required expertise, has all the resources. This is very, very critical, that has all the resources in a ready mode to conduct the study, is available in terms of time as well as resources to ensure that the study is conducted in a proper way. The monitor is also responsible for ensuring that the institutional facilities like the hospitals or the nursing homes have the requisite requirements to ensure that the study conduct has no gaps or does not have any non-compliances in terms of electricity or in terms of personnel, trained staff, storage space is sufficient, all equipment are present, the laboratories are well staffed and have all the requisites, that is mandatory requirement for the conduct of the study. Monitor also has an important role to monitor whether the IP, which is the investigational product, is available in proper quantity, supplied through a proper system, and the handling of these products have happened exactly the way it is written in the standard operating procedure, which is SOP. The monitor also ensures the entire chain like cradle to grave of the receipt, use, return and disposal of the investigational product. Monitor also has a very, very critical role to ensure that the site, that is the clinical trial site, which can be a hospital or a nursing home, and the investigator, that is a PI, receives the current investigation brochure, which we call it IB. Because these versions keep on changing, having the latest version is extremely important. It also checks whether the investigator follows the protocol. This is extremely important because majority of the non-compliances are because of the protocol deviations and the serious ones are protocol violations. So, it is very important for us to know what is deviation, what is amendment, what are violation. Protocol deviation is unplanned change. You would like to do X and you do Y is unplanned change, that is deviation. Amendment is a planned change where you plan to do something, you want to do something else, you plan it and change it in advance before the conduct of that exercise. That planned change is amendment, and violation is when we do not obey any of the protocol steps and you violate totally. Protocol violation is a serious has serious consequences. Maintaining the essential documents. Essential documents are extremely important. Essential documents, as the name suggests, are all the documents which are essential for the conduct of the study. They are available before the study conduct, during the study conduct and after the study conduct. Some of the essential documents, for examples, are protocol, the investigation brochure, the case record form, the clinical study reports, etc. Monitor also ensures that all the people are trained in the protocol and they follow the GCP guideline and all the prescribed standard operating procedures that are present in the study. The monitor also performs the specific functions which are in accordance with the protocol as well as the agreement that the clinical trial encompasses. None of the parties can delegate any assigned functions to unauthorized individuals are also looked after by the monitor. Ethics committee. The responsibilities of ethics committee is extremely important. They are the gatekeeper, and if you have heard the lecture L10 which was just now, which this is L11, so you had an exposure to L10 already. We have covered the ethical considerations, especially the ethical guidelines by ICMR 2017 which speaks about all the areas. So, ethics committee are gatekeepers. They have a critical role of reviewing and approving a trial protocol. They may review, but they may not approve. So, reviewing is a separate thing and approving is a separate thing. They are supposed to review the ongoing trials on a continual basis. Also review the periodic study progress report, monitor the clinical trials for which they have already given approvals. They should be also vigilant about reporting the serious adverse events as per the timelines prescribed by the CLA, that is the Central Licensing Authority. Here it is the CDSU, and forward those essays as per those timelines. They are also supposed to report any changes that has occurred during the study. They should inform that to the CLAs. Responsibility of investigator. Investigator is the critical factor and is the most important stakeholder in any clinical trial. Investigator is a clinician. He or she is responsible for conducting the clinical trial as per the protocol and guidelines. So, it is extremely important that the investigator is medically qualified, has enough experience and has already obtained a training on good clinical practice and is aware about the current regulatory requirements for conducting clinical trials in India. The investigator should also be aware of the standard operating procedures, the documentations, the requirements of reporting of adverse events as well as serious adverse events, ensure that there is adequate medical care which is provided to the study participants or subject. Investigator is responsible for providing all the informations during the informed consent process and should participate actively during the entire process of seeking informed consent and also be responsible for all the medical care that the participant or the study subject deserves. The investigator should inform to the nominee in case of any injury or death. In clinical trial, the investigator is a physician who is doing a clinical trial. So, investigator is a physician who takes a great responsibility in various aspects for ensuring that the study participants' medical care is not compromised. So, the investigator's care includes the patient safety, which is foremost and sacrosanct in nature, and the documentations which are very, very critical during the journey of clinical trial. So, the investigator is a personnel who is involved with the clinical trial before it, during it and after the clinical trial. Record keeping and data handling. This is an extremely important area, and majority of the deficiencies that has been observed in clinical trial are actually related to poor record keeping and data handling. The section covers about what is documentation. We say in clinical trial, if it is not documented, it is not done. It is equally important to document what was not done, because if you try to capture what was done, there might be things which you have not done it, and it will be too late to recollect those and write it. So, the suggestion is also always to write what was done and also to capture all that was not done. This will help you in later on in the clinical trial phase. What are records which should be documented? All records in all forms, whether it can be written, it can be electronic, it can be magnetic, it can be optical, it can be scan, it can be X-rays, it can be ECGs. All the methods, all the conduct process, all the results, all the action taken, this all should be recorded. So, the records for examples like protocols, the copies of various submissions, the approval letters that you get from ethics committee or the regulators, the consent forms that you take, the reconsent forms, the monitoring reports, the audit certificates, the relevant letters that you receive from various agencies during the conduct of the study, the reference ranges that you receive from the laboratories, the raw data and the completed case record forms and final reports are to be documented. Corrections. Extremely important to know that in clinical trial, whenever you write in a document, you have to remember that writing a document in clinical trial is as good as signing a check. So, when you write a wrong thing in a check, how do you cancel it? You exactly follow the same procedures when you undertake any clinical trial and do the documentation. That means, whenever you make any corrections, you are not supposed to use any white marker or any whiteout or a post-it. You have to use a pen which is black or blue in color and obscure should mark in such a way, the corrections should be made in such a way that it should not obscure the original entry. The correct data should be written with a reason for why you are writing those data, and the reason, and it should be signed, dated with initials, and it should be one of the authorized person who has been delegated by the investigator. It is extremely important to know about good documentation practice. So, some of the do's and don'ts are like what you should do. You should always do real time entry, never backdate, never ever play with the dates, because you will land in problems. Sign and date every entry at the time of the task is done. If there is any blank area, please delete those areas, please mark it that it is blank, because it can be misused later on. Every single letter that you write and every number that you write in a clinical trial should be readable. Please use permanent ink which is indelible, you can use black or blue. All entries which are made into an official document must be preserved properly. What are don'ts? Never use anything which is erasable, non-waterproof ink and pencils. Use of correction fluid and correction tapes are banned in clinical trial. Entering signature or initials of someone else can be very risky. Use of post-it notes, unofficial notes to record data can land into problem. Backdating and post-dating are equally dangerous. EDP, electronic data processing. What is electronic data processing? You should have few of the elements for electronic data processing. As you know that we are in the era of electronic data, we cannot avoid having data or informations in electronic forms, but it is extremely important that we should have few of the important things which are like security controls, validation, validated hardware and software, the audit trails and the data backup. So, what is security control? Whenever you have any electronic data which is about clinical trial, you must have an authorized staff who can enter the data. You should also have an authorized staff who can modify. The person who enters the data should not have the right to modify. The hardware and the software that you use should be validated. I will invite you or request you to study about 21 CFR part 11 to understand this area better. Audit trail, it is very important when you see any data, whether electronic data or non-electronic data, any data should be able to answer 5 W and 1 H: who, when, where, what, why and how. Data backup, it is extremely important that you back up your data in various forms like backup 1, backup 2, and also do go and check up and retrieve document that whether it is possible to retrieve them and keep a proper documentation. The backup can be off-site backup or can be on-site backup. You should have a standard operating procedures for this in this area. Validation of the EDP system. If any trial data are entered directly in the computer, there must always be an adequate safeguard to ensure that the validation is done. That means you sign it and date it, the printout, and have a backup of the records. Whenever I spoke about that computerized systems, I spoke about hardware and software, and I spoke about how you should validate it and should have a detailed description when it was validated and if the validations has to be kept up to date. Language. What should be the language for any documents that you write during clinical trial? It should be in a language that is clearly understood by all the concerned stakeholders. For example, the participants or subjects, the paramedical staffs and monitors. It should be simple to be better understood. Quality assurance. This is extremely important because at the end of the study, you give public an assurance that the right, safety and well-being of all the study participants are well protected. You can only do it when you have a very strong quality assurance system. Quality is the legal responsibility of sponsor. So, sponsor ensures that the quality system is placed through monitoring as well as quality assurance, that is audit. But is the sponsor alone responsible? All the stakeholders are equally responsible to ensure that the study conduct is done as per all the compliance or all the requirements. So, the sponsor's responsibility is to ensure first that the study is performed. If performed, the data is generated. If the data is generated, they are recorded. If they are recorded, they are reported, and all this that happen in compliance with the protocol, which is the mother document, as well as the good clinical practice guidelines and all the applicable regulatory requirements at that scenario. That means all the current regulatory requirements. So, having a documented standard operating procedures or SOPs are a prerequisite for an effective quality assurance. All the observations which happen during the clinical trial conduct should be verifiable. What is verifiable? That means you should be able to give credibility of the data that is generated and assured. Assured, what is assured? The conclusions are correctly derived from the raw data. This is extremely important because this ensures that the verification process is specified and justified. Acceptable method of data verification is extremely important. That means you should have a statistical controlled sampling, you should do data QC, and this data QC should be applied at every stage of the data handling, because there are good chances that you make mistakes and you take some data which is a wrong data. So, to ensure that all data that are captured are reliable and have been processed correctly, it is mandatory to undergo or undertake data QC. Sponsors audit are conducted by whom? The sponsors audits are conducted by persons who are independent of all the responsibility in the study. Why? Because then they will have no bias and will have no conflict of interest. Investigational sites, facilities, all data and documentations should be covered when we talk about quality assurance about this, and they should be available at the site or the clinical trial site, and sponsors, auditor as well as other people should have an access to that. So, if we speak about 3 levels of checking, the first level can be the monitoring, which is the quality control. The second level can be the audit, which is quality assurance, and the third level can be inspection. If it happens, the inspection is always by the regulatory authority or the central licensing authority. Who is responsible for quality as we discussed? Legally it is the sponsor's responsibility, but if you see, each and every stakeholder involved in the clinical trial is responsible for the total quality. We say totality of responsibility. So, the investigator who is involved in the study coordinators, the CRAs, CRCs, the ethics committee who are the gatekeepers of that, the laboratory who has generated all the data, the monitors who are involved in monitoring the study, and if you are very lucky or otherwise, the auditor and the regulators are also responsible. So, 3.1.17 speaks about that the sponsor may transfer any or all of the responsibilities, but still it is the responsibility of the sponsor to ensure that the quality and integrity of the study data always remain with them. Statistics. This is the area which is quite interesting and important. The role of biostatisticians should be defined. They should be involved in the planning as well as throughout the study conduct. They should be qualified and experienced, and they should have a statistical model which should be incorporated in the protocol. That is, the number of subjects or the sample size should be designed in advance. Study design. Study design is extremely important because it determines the scientific integrity and credibility of the report. The study design should have specified the rationale, that means why the target difference between the treatment that the study is designed to detect. The study design should also be able to have the power to detect the difference, the clinical significance of the statistical differences, the measures which are taken to avoid bias, that is how you address randomization and blinding. Statistical analysis, this should be planned in advance, all the types should be clearly identified, what forms the basis of the statistical model should be addressed. It should describe and justify in the final report and all the subsequent deviations. There is a need and extent of an interim analysis. If there is a need, then you should specify that in the protocol well in advance. All the missing data, unused data, spurious data should be accounted. All omissions must be documented, and the results which are presented to facilitate interpretations, which is like clinical importance, also should be considered. These are all very important areas of statistical analysis. We have a special chapter or lecture on special concerns. That is why I will not go deep into that, and that lecture will address all the areas, whether it is vaccines or contraceptives or surgical procedures or medical devices, diagnostic agents like radioactive materials and X-rays, phytopharmaceuticals, all etc. I just would like to tell you about something like all vaccines are new drugs, all monoclonal antibodies are new drugs. So, we should understand what are new drugs where clinical trial is applied. Also, we should know about the medical device. We have another online course which is running parallel with this, which is on medical devices and in vitro diagnostics. The clinical trial of medical device and in vitro diagnostics are different. They are done in a way which we call it clinical investigation plan. So, that is what we had studied about all the chapters. So, at the end, if somebody asks you what does the compliance with GCP mean to you, it is same what we addressed when we started this session. We spoke that GCP means that you give public an assurance about RSW, that is the right, safety and well-being of all the study participants are well protected during the conduct of the study, and DQI, that is the data quality and integrity, are assured, that means the data are credible and accurate. So, the CDSA or the Indian GCP does not address the 13 principles, but it is important for us to know all the 13 principles. So, I will briefly cover all of them. The first principle begins with ethics, GCP and regulatory requirements. It talks about the first most important crucial element of any clinical trial conduct is about ethics. We say a bad science is bad ethics and vice versa. So, all the clinical trials that should be conducted in accordance to the ethical principles. That is, in India, it is the ethical, the ICMR National Ethical Guidelines 2017. There is another one for pediatric children, that is also 2017. All these have their origin in the Declaration of Helsinki, and all the clinical trial that you conduct should be consistent with the good clinical practice. In India, it is a CDSA 2001, and all applicable regulatory requirements which are present. Here in India, it is the New Drugs and Clinical Trial Rules 2019. The second principle talks about benefit and risk. Whenever you conduct a study or whenever the study is being reviewed, before a trial is initiated, it is very important to see the foreseeable risk and the inconveniences, and this should be weighed against the anticipated benefits of the individuals or the trial subjects or the participants and the society. A trial, a clinical trial should only be initiated and continued once its anticipated benefits justify the risk. That means, your benefit should always be more than. Third, subject over science and society. There is a discussion about good science and bad science that I spoke just now. At any moment, at any given time of during the conduct of the study, the subjects should be of subjects should be important, and the right, safety and their well-being are the most important considerations and should prevail over the interest of science and society at any given time and every time. Adequacy of previous data. It is extremely important. We have a special lecture on lecture L4, which is about the previous data, which is preclinical requirements, where we have discussed about all the non-clinical and the clinical information that the product should have, and what are the different requirements, for example, the animal pharmacology, the toxicology, the safety pharmacology data. These all information should be adequate to support the proposed clinical trial. Fifth, scientifically sound protocol. Protocol is the most important document in a clinical trial. Any areas where you face queries or have any confusion, I think so protocol should be able to answer those. So, a clinical trial should have a scientifically sound protocol which should have a clear and a detailed descriptions of all the steps that the study intends to address. Independent review. Principle 6, extremely important. The review which is done by the ethics committee should be independent in nature. How do you ensure that? The ethics committee should have people who are outside the institution, and also the chairman of the ethics committee should be from the should be from outside. So, we had a detailed discussion about this in our lecture L10, which is ethical consideration. Principle 7, qualified medical care. What does this mean? The people who are involved, the clinicians should be qualified. That means they should have a degree which is recognized by MCI. If it is a dental study, it should be a dentist. Principle 8, it is about education, training and experience. We all know that the people who are engaged in clinical trial, the clinicians are of course qualified by educations. They can have MBBS, MD or MCH or DM degrees, and they can have several years of experience, but their training on GCP and the current regulatory requirements and current ethical requirements for conducting clinical trials in India is extremely important, and this training should not be initial, it should be ongoing. So, initial as well as ongoing, and their curriculum vitae and their details should be updated and kept. It is extremely important to fulfill the 3 requirements about education, experience and training. Principle 9, requirement of informed consent. Informed consent is the weakest link in clinical trial. We call it kamzor kadi. The way the informed consent is taken, the way the informed consent documentation is kept is extremely important to understand how the clinical trial is conducted at that site. The informed consent should be given freely. That means the people should have autonomy to withdraw from the study without hampering their medical care, and should be obtained from each and every participant prior to their participation in the clinical trial. Principle 10, fidelity of record and documentation. When the GCP was revised by the ICH in 2016, the 10th principle was the only principle which was revised. That means we definitely have some lacunae in how we record and document when we conduct a clinical trial. It is extremely important to understand the power of good record keeping and documentation. We say that clinical trial is all about documents, documents and documents, and how you keep them is extremely important. So, all clinical trial, all the information that you gather from source data till clinical study report should be recorded properly, should be handled properly, should be stored with several backups what we discussed, so that it allows an accurate reporting, interpretation and verification. Principle 11, confidentiality of the subject. The identity of subject should not be revealed. They should be protected, thus respecting the privacy and confidentiality. The privacy and the confidentiality we have discussed how we differentiate between them in our earlier lecture L10. So, that is the reason all the participants or the study subjects involved in the study are referred as a number like subject ID or participant ID. 12th principle, integrity of the investigational product. This is of utmost importance because the entire clinical trial is based on the investigational product, and if the investigational product integrity is doubtful, the entire study will be null and void. So, how the investigational product is manufactured, whether it is manufactured as per the GMP, that is good manufacturing practice, is important. How it is handled, how it is stored, how it is used is extremely important. All this will be mentioned in your study protocol, which will be approved protocol from the ethics committee as well as from the central licensing authority, that is CDSA. The last principle, principle 13, which talks about systems and procedures to assure quality. So, what is system and what is procedure and how will they ensure quality? Systems with procedure means standard operating procedures. That means to ensure quality, you have to assure that all the steps which are written in the protocol are being abided and there is no non-compliance. How you can do that? You can start by writing SOP. The first SOP should be your SOP of SOP, and then all the standard operating procedures should be aligned to the protocol, so that you have very minimal or no non-compliances. Every standard operating procedure should have a template checklist forms, so that you ensure by filling up this form that you are compliant to SOP. Once you are compliant to SOP, you are very close to compliance to the protocol, and you should do for each and every aspect of the trial, so that you can assure by ensuring those. ICH GCP guideline. This lecture covers the GCP guideline by CDSA 2001, and we are not covering the 2016 ICH GCP E6R2, but for all global clinical trials which are conducted in India, ICH GCP E6R2, which was released in 2016, should be followed in addition to the Indian GCP or the CDSA GCP 2001. I request all of you to go through this guideline of E6R2. The link is provided here along with this. Please go through it and read both the guidelines. Just briefly, what is ICH? ICH is the International Council for Harmonization of Technical Requirements for Pharmaceutical for Human Use. It was first initiated in 1996 by European Union, US, Japan, and the main purpose of this was to standardize the conduct of the study and all the requirements among all the countries, so that the study which is conducted in, say, India should not be repeated in X or Y countries. So, repeating in individual countries will be reduced by following a standardized guideline, and that is how ICH GCP was there. ICH GCP got revised from 1996 to 2016. The WHO GCP was released in 2002. It has 14 principles which are almost the similar principles that we covered just now. They were from the ICH GCP, and that is it, ladies and gentlemen. This is a very short course on GCP. Actually, GCP is a very big lecture in general, and we are planning to come up with only a course which is on good clinical practice. So, that is our upcoming online course on good clinical practice. Please keep watching us. Maybe you will have a link when we will release this course on good clinical practice. Let us do a quick recap to understand whether you have understood this better. So, can you please name any of the 2 principles that we discussed about at GCP? Any 2? We had 13 principles. Yes? Anything else? Yes, you can remember science over society. So, subject over science and society, that you can remember as, say, S3. So, this is one of the principle 3rd, I think so. Scientifically sound protocol can be one. You can name any of the 2 from the 13. Now, can you fill in the blank? Can you say what is there in the fill in the blanks? The fill in the blanks read as: a physician doing clinical trial is still a physician, with all that entails to take great responsible care in all aspects of study participant. This care includes dash and dash throughout the journey. Do you remember the responsibilities of investigator? Yes, yes, please try. No, no, the answer is wrong. It is about patient safety, which is of paramount importance, as well as the documentation. So, the physician is responsible for patient safety as well as the documentation. Can you take up this question? Who is responsible to provide the study drug, that is investigational product? Yes, please try. Yes, yes, you are right. It is the responsibility of sponsor to provide the study drug to the investigator. So, let us do a quick summary recap about this. Is that what did we study today? We studied about what is GCP, good clinical practice. We actually touched upon the Indian GCP, that is the CDSA GCP guideline as per released in 2001. We also went through the prerequisites of the study. For definitions, I had given a link. Please go through the definitions carefully. It is a long list. We are unable to cover in the short course. And we spoke about all the roles and responsibilities, very brief, all the stakeholders like the sponsor, the monitor, the investigator, the ethics committees, all. We discussed about the record keeping and data handling, which is extremely important. We also touched upon the quality assurance and the statistics. We also briefly covered about the vaccines and medical devices, but we have a special lecture on special concerns. That is why we have not touched upon this. So, that is it, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you had a brief idea about good clinical practice in lecture 11, and best wishes to all of you and namaskar and jai.